I think because, so two online, how many online? Yeah. And Nat is gonna join late, probably online, so,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
so I'm almost ready. I'll let you know, Steve, we're not ready. Okay, now we are ready. We're now good.
Great. Welcome to the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Stephen Perez and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee. We will be joined in a bit by Nad, so I will turn it over to him once he joins us. Tonight we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. As a reminder, New York State law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. We need a volunteer to take minutes. If you're able to take minutes, please let me know now.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
You did it the last
Yeah.
time.
I'm happy to do it. I can do it if you like.
Oh, you're doing it as we're going on. All right then, okay.
It's up to you.
No, that's all right. No,
Okay.
I was going to look
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
videotape. so-
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would do the same thing, because I mean, you're smart to bring your laptop with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Great. So now we'll take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Tanya Arias.
Present.
Jim Collins.
Yep.
B. Disman.
Present.
Rob Barfin.
Here, present.
Nat Galani. Might join us later. Ava Marie Lassiter.
Present.
David Lowenstein.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Present.
Steve Perez.
Present.
Roberto Ruiz Melendez, I do not see, but we do have a quorum.
Perfect. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. We'll now look at the minutes. The minutes from the September 30th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the September 30th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CV6 website. So, ground rules. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I'll identify so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud and on the record during the meeting. Great. With that, we will open with our first agenda point, which was a continuing discussion from essentially a topic that we've addressed at two of our previous meetings, and that is the redistricting reforms for New York State. So we distributed the draft resolution to all committee members in advance of the meeting. I hope you all had a chance to at least take a look at it, but it captures much of what we discussed in prior meetings. And with that, I will open it up to the floor to see if anyone has comments, questions on the resolution.
I mean, I thought it was well written and it covers basically what everything we would want to include. because, I mean, we got involved in the redistricting. The initial meeting was because we had this kind of redistricting that didn't make sense, right? We had to advocate for our community. And then I think this is going broader to kind of overall say we want a more fair system.
Are there any drafting choices or anything to call attention to when you were writing it?
Sorry?
Any like drafting decisions or standing major to flag?
No real major points. I mean, Nat and I tweaked it
Yeah.
offline, but a lot of it comes from that symposium that I attended, so it's not like we're kind of entirely making up
Right.
these recommendations.
Yeah, there's like a lot of good government groups
there's,
have asked for these
you know,
same changes.
yeah, well regarded.
Yeah.
It's not just our committee that
Yeah.
has said these are the things that need to be
Right.
enacted. So I think it's just because that we were impacted by the redistricting
Yeah.
in our district. And I think it's, it's important that the community board also voice its support and not just kind of lawyers and academics and, some of the nonprofits. So I think it just may catch our electeds' attention
Mhm.
to hear from a board, and then we can see if other boards also want to
Right.
take on the issue.
Now, we crossed out the word flawed, right? Because,
Yeah, that was just simply to over editorialize, stick to the facts about
yeah, just stick to the
Yeah.
facts, because
Yeah.
the flawed it could be open
it could
to
be
interpretation.
interpretation. Yeah, so that's why we decided to remove it.
Good. Okay.
This is only as respects the state districts, correct? It's not regarding the House districts.
These are all legislative districts.
Yeah, it's House districts in New York State, it's just not the council districts, because this is the
Yeah.
state legislation, the IRC doesn't do our city council district. But this would impact
No.
our House districts.
Those are also grievously flawed, by the way.
B has her hand raised.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, B.
So I thought this was well written and I thought it was very factual. And I thought it really handled in your resolves in dealing with transparency, public input, independence, priority. So I support this. And I think it is a fantastic general statement on what we'd like to see.
Thank you, B.
And this goes now to other community boards, or how we?
Well,
We have to go to full board.
we first need to pass it here
We
in
need to
this
pass it
committee,
here,
then it will go to
okay.
full board meeting tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Assuming that,
yeah.
We need a motion of,
Yeah, and then we generally, and Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we share it with our elected official. We don't necessarily always share our resolutions with other community boards, but we can do that, or we can bring it up at a board meeting. I mean, Jesus goes to borough board.
Okay,
Sandy,
Yeah,
Sandy.
Sandy does, not Jesus, okay, yeah. So Sandy, we can ask her to bring this up for the other community boards as an issue.
okay.
B, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the resolution as written.
seconded.
I said, mhm.
Okay. So when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Or excuse me, not entitled. Tanya Arias,
Approved.
Jim Collins,
Opposed,
Pete
for
Isman,
reasons I'll list in a memo to the chair.
Pete
Support,
Isman,
support.
Rob Farfan,
Approved.
Ned Kalani isn't here yet, Ava Marie Lassiter,
In favor.
David Lowenstein,
In favor.
Rachel Patel,
In favor.
Steve Perez.
In favor.
With 7 in favor, 1 opposed, this passes. And will be, I guess, before full board tomorrow.
I would have liked to have had longer debate, but I'll put my thoughts in a memo.
Okay,
I think some of the language is nebulous, and I think that that it's kind of hypocritical to talk about dividing established communities or when we have city council districts going across community board districts and assembly districts, so, and senate districts. So those are some of my objections to the thoughts. Nice job. I mean, you guys worked hard, and I'm sure, but I don't think it's 100% yet. Let's go. We can go on.
So we are going to move on to the next topic of the agenda, which is monitoring and integrity and transparency in government. I think this is a topic that came about because I think, as many of you have probably heard, there are all kinds of investigations going on into city government, and I think people are reasonably questioning what are the kinds of mechanisms that we have in place to monitor and understand what is happening in city government. So really this is sort of a broad topic, but because there are some bills before the city council at the moment, and there was some testimony earlier this year, I thought one way to approach it would be because this is a very large topic, could go into many different areas when we talk about transparency, but one was to maybe anchor the discussion, first focus on city, because that's kind of rather than kind of multi-level
Right.
layers of government, which all have their own particular issues and transparency mechanisms. But we could first focus on the city. And then because, as I mentioned, there are some bills before the city council with respect to campaign finance in particular.
Right.
And because many of the investigations currently going on around the mayor's office had a lot to do with campaign finance. So that was one reason why we thought to anchor the discussion on sort of the campaign finance bills. Although it can be broader if there are sort of burning issues that other committee members feel like we need to address. But I would say if there are no objections, maybe we first start talking about the campaign finance
I think it's very important.
issues, because it's central, sort of, again, central to what's going on in the city right now, and central to some legislation that's being proposed.
Yeah, so the one thing, I actually looked at the legislation that they proposed, and one thing I'd like to bring up is that there were campaign finance issues with Bill de Blasio. There, John Liu, who, was a city controller, even Mayor Bloomberg had some questions, when you go back, New York City, there's always been.
This
there's
is New
been
York
lots of-
City,
this
we're
lo-
talking about.
Yeah,
Well,
this is
it's
Tammany Hall.
Well, so the campaign finance issues have come up a lot of times. I was surprised that actually this time he got indicted because, de Blasio is the one I remember most recently did not. And I would also say that New York City has much stricter campaign finance laws than the federal and the state level. And that's another reason why people do get in trouble more. But we've had more people indicted at the state level, like look at Sheldon Silver, if anyone is old enough to
Right.
remember.
I remember Sheldon Silver.
Yeah,
I do.
yeah. So that's just a part of history, because I feel like when people talk about Adams and what's happened, this is a systemic problem that's been around for a while.
So sorry, go ahead.
You can go.
So is this a failure of the laws or a failure of the implementation of the laws?
I was
Because,
gonna ask,
you can have all the laws in the world, but if you don't have the mechanism to enforce these laws, and it doesn't matter how many laws you put in. I mean, I lost my country to corruption. So as far as I'm concerned, corruption is, I am completely against any form of corruption. And all this money.
Can I ask what country?
Cuba.
Cuba, okay.
All this money in politics in the United States it's actually obscene. It's obscene, and you can see in the decisions that are made, both in rezoning the city, or what developers get to go above the FARs, or what, it's really terrifying.
I think we have a tangible ask here. I read the Gothamist article, and the CFP guy says we need more funding if we're gonna implement this, so I think from our perspective, calling on that funding and calling for maybe an intermediate party to police this bureau is something that we can.
So what
put into
happens is
this.
anytime you run for office, and I just full disclosure, I ran for citywide office, my audit is still not complete, but I am knee deep in this issue as a result. And I'm not the only one, like many people who ran not in just 2021, but even 4 years
Before.
before that, their audits are not done because it is understaffed and underfunded. But they do the audit only after the fact. So my audit didn't even start until a year after my campaign was over. And when you're running, there's so much pressure to, so the problem is money in politics. And even though we have a system that is trying to make it more fair by doing match funding, there's so much pressure for you to raise money when you're a candidate and you have staffers, you have friends who are trying to help you. And there are friends of mine who did things that, like, I went through the training, my treasurer went through training, but they didn't, right? And luckily, because I was on top of it, because I had paid attention to this, I would say, no, you can't. Like, you can't do it this way, you can't do that, right? But I can see why someone else would get into trouble, because if you're not paying that much attention and you're out there trying to go to all these forums, meet people, trying to get votes, and just trying to fundraise, somebody else is doing your entry into the system, figuring out, and they may not follow all the rules. And the problem is that they don't tell you right away, right? So you may have had, you know what, some incorrect donation, but it doesn't get caught till a year later.
Right, well, I would also
Yeah.
say that's bad enforcement, like.
Yeah,
They
that's
should
it, that's
be,
what-
they should be
exactly.
funded so that they
Yeah.
can be there and
Exactly.
tell people how things should be done before they happen.
Yeah, and also you like have to email them if you have a question, and it takes a couple of days for them to even get back to you.
Right,
This was also, they were still remote at the time. I think they're probably back in the office now.
Yeah.
But it's not like you can just call up and ask a question.
Right.
So that's really the key.
And
there's always gonna be correct. Regardless, but.
Yeah,
I think Jen wants to say
Yeah.
something. Jen?
Yeah. Does Campaign Finance Board request the 3-digit or 4-digit authentication code on credit cards when it takes a contribution? Because that had been a big issue with Act Blue.
Yeah, I mean,
Does anybody know the answer to that?
my understanding is, like, as you mentioned, a lot of the credit card transactions go through these platforms like ActBlue, things like that.
ActBlue
So,
and- yeah.
Yes.
like, if you're using
I
that.
don't- Does Act Blue do state and local or city campaigns?
yeah,
know,
it does. You can use AdBlue, but the city prefers to you to do the NYC votes, because what happens
Right.
is it can then cross-check that
Right.
you're a registered voter in New York City for the match funding.
Right, but do they require the 3-digit authentication or
So-
the back of the credit card, the
I think they
4-digit
do.
or 3-digit?
I think they do.
Any online payment.
Any
They do.
online payment is.
Yeah,
going to
you have
require
to
it.
put like that little, if it's an Amex on the front, is that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's
Security
3 or
code.
4 digits, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, this, there's a saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And we do have an elephant, which is Citizens United and the way that elections take place in this country. I mean, we can try and control what happens here at the city. It's all we can do, obviously. We can't go to SCOTUS and tell them, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
But, it's, again, can we review the laws that are in place to avoid this, to see if they're effective, and if they're not effective, why are they not being effective, and why are they not being?
Yeah, I mean, so the laws are in place. This is why people are getting in trouble. It's just that it happens not in real time, right? Like, if this had been caught right away, it wouldn't have been it would have been such a large number, would be it, right? And sometimes they do catch it right away. There are candidates who have straw donors, things happen while they're actually already running too. I don't know the details I don't know what happened with Adam's audit, why this happened, and it's an added issue. Because the foreign donation, right, which is a federal campaign
But look
finance
at the
issue.
guy that from, what was his name, Santos?
Santos,
I mean, he
But
made
see-
it all the way up to.
because that was federal, so that's something, the city laws are much stricter than the federal laws.
I mean.
You could not do that in a city campaign.
I think B wants to,
Yeah.
say, go ahead, B.
Go ahead, B.
You're on mute.
Okay, so I think part of the problem is there are laws in place, but the real problem is enforcement and the
That's
timing of what it is. And so, just looking to do new laws when you won't have the resources or the desire, and I think there's a lack of desire to improve the process. I just don't think changing the law deals with the issue. I think you have to have a commitment to have
I agree.
the oversight agency, the resources needed, and you also have to explain and train it, not just to the candidates like yourself, but everyone has staff. And staff has to have the requirements of understanding it. So, New York City has pretty significant laws compared to the feds, which I know, but they don't have the enforcement. A year later, to get an audit, that is absolutely absurd.
Yeah,
It is.
no, and again, as I say, it's still ongoing, right? But, other candidates have had to take longer. The one thing though I'll say is that, oh, and I forget what I was gonna say about the training. So they have great training. They have lots of trainings, right? The problem is finding the people. Like I had a really good treasurer, and now that people are ramping up to run again for next cycle, the number of people who've asked me for a recommendation for a treasurer, because there just aren't people out there. And oftentimes then you just have your spouse, brother, sister, someone be the treasurer for you, and then they don't know the system as well as someone who's actually a treasurer who's done multiple campaigns.
One thing,
That wasn't Eric Adams's
No,
problem.
that's not, that's what everything, that's what I'm talking about, but any given time, like last election cycle, we had 439 people run for office in the city between all the city council seats and
No,
any open seats,
that'd be
it's like 8 or 9 people. And so there's a sheer number of people, so there's not enough staff to do the work. And frankly, I also feel like all the vendors hike their prices. Your TV ads, everybody, right? They're gonna be,
Surge pricing.
you're not doing that at a council level, but at a mayoral level, you are.
Mhm.
And so then you have like kind of like surge pricing, printing the t-shirts, everything costs a lot more. And so I think in any legislation, there should be some kind of cap. So people don't take advantage of that, like being like, you can't spend more than this much on TV ads or some
Well,
kind of.
something we draft could have multiple prongs of like, we
Yeah.
want to see money out of politics and local
Yeah.
elections, and we also want the CFB to be,
Yeah,
enforcing.
well,
Yeah.
the other thing I will say is if you read through these laws, they actually do speak to actually enforcement mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not just kind of like new, or, kind of amorphous laws. They're really specific
Yeah.
about like verification. For example, how do you verify that someone actually gave you the donation? And so it puts that kind of in there. There are some problems with it, with the testimony, but that's kind of like these laws aren't like, they're not general laws that are trying to, they're very specific
It's a full
about
body of law.
how to like
Campaign
enforce
campaign
it.
finance is no.
So again, the issue is enforcement. The
Jim,
issue
go
is
ahead.
Jim.
Yeah, we're kind of overlooking the elephant in the room, which is that a lot of the lobbyists for the city tend to take large fees and then pass that fee along, and including contributions from corporations, payments from corporations, and then pass that amount on it as contributions from themselves, their staffs, etc. I think there needs to be some way to designate and prove if you're a lobbyist, you should be able to prove the work that you did for the fee that you receive, and the excess, be able to designate the excess as an excess contribution that should not be flowing through to a campaign contribution. I've seen that any number of times.
So if you do any kind of business with the city, you cannot get matching funds, and you're limited to $150 donation.
Right, but if you hire a lobbyist to run your effort, okay,
Yeah.
and let's say the lobbyist has a staff or of full or part-time employees, they can pay them, here's your fee, and then run that through as a campaign contribution.
Oh, I
From
see.
them
So
individually.
someone, they can go through another, okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically a money laundering for all intents and
Well,
purposes.
it's conduits. There's always been
Institutional
conduits.
Yeah, you can't do it, yeah.
Yeah. it's
Yeah,
just
but you're not
crazy.
going to be able to see them. You know what I'm saying? If
Yeah,
you're doing
no, I see what you're
$5,000
saying.
worth of work, if you're doing $5,000 worth of lobbying work, and your client pays you $50,000 with the understanding that $45,000 is to go to their preferred candidate in a race, how is the city campaign finance board going to run that down? How are they going to?
So this, I mean, there's also, so the difference between, I mean, now the state has reformed and now the state has a public financing of campaigns. But before you could give that kind of money, you could give that kind of money on a federal level, on the city level. I don't know what this cycle, but last cycle you could only give up to 2,200 and only up to 250 was matched for a citywide race and only up to 150 for a council race. So that's how you avoid those large numbers.
So,
Not if you dispense it through
Yeah, you can get multiple people.
individuals.
Yeah, you can get multiple.
Multiple
That's
individuals,
what
yes.
Adams is in
Yeah.
trouble for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Should we maybe look at that one, because that's actually exactly what one
Yeah.
of the laws is talking about.
Yeah.
Brendan, if you want to pull up intro 0953.
Okay, just.
And so after, when de Blasio had the accusations against him, this actually, the same bill had come up,
Mhm.
and then it just got held up.
So this bill prohibits campaigns for city office and the committees from accepting contributions bundled by persons who have business dealings with the city.
Yeah.
Because right now, what essentially it is now, if you're on the doing business database as an individual, you have there's a threshold where you can't give a certain amount and all of that. But if you bundle donations, that's okay.
Wow,
So this is saying,
that's a huge loophole.
yeah, this is saying it's gonna get rid of that bundling. If they exceed certain amounts for each office.
Yeah.
So like a bundled donation can't, it depends on the office. There are different.
Yeah, because
amounts,
there's different levels for each.
But it seems like a rational way to curb at least some of that.
But what's the enforcement of it?
Yeah. I'm with you, baby. It's the enforcement is the issue, really.
Yeah, and this wouldn't stop the instance of the individual donors that I spoke of.
Yeah, it's not clear from the law itself.
Yeah.
How do they?
I mean, how do they
enforce
figure out, like right now, when they audit, they go through each contribution you had and they go through each expenditure you have and they check it. And so they would have to check the bundling.
And
which
is
they
this in
could do.
real time? Is this done in real time?
No, it's done when the audit happens.
So, and your audit happened a year after?
Yeah.
So is it a staffing issue that they don't have enough people to audit, your campaign?
Yeah, so I think it real time, I mean, you're supposed to submit, the way it works is every month when. In the 6 months leading to the election, you have to submit every month what you did, right? And then, but people start running even in advance of that. And in advance of that, you're filing every quarter, right? So it's always gonna be a backward looking thing, but they don't start the audit until after the campaigns are over.
But they might be able to detect it if you're doing financial disclosure.
Yeah, you're doing disclosure, so they can, they can detect it. And there are things, and there's stuff, exactly. And there are things that are, I mean, I had things detected during my monthly disclosure.
Yeah, so that's the key. The key is not wait till you're already in.
Right.
Yeah.
The key is, prior to that, there's a sort of, track.
So the question
tracking
is
it.
staffing to make it more robust.
But also
Yeah.
technology. So what type of technology they're using? In today's world, you would assume there's an awful lot of stuff that you can get almost in real time.
Yeah, I mean, it's all done online, right? You submit your fundraising.
And is there checking online too? Do they match against different databases and stuff, or just based on what you submitted?
I mean, I think they match because they're double checking.
With the amount of people that are running for office,
Yeah.
I don't know what the staffing is for that group, but I mean, is it gonna be enough to handle the amount of people that are running for you to submit and look at monthly reports or
I
even
think that's
quarterly
the point of
reports?
our
Yeah.
resolution.
Yeah, so that's a
Say,
point, that's a point of it, because they're under, I mean, I think at most they probably have 9 people. I forget how many people at CFP right now. And so this is why it takes so long. Yeah.
Yeah, so the issue is not lack of laws. The issue is having the infrastructure.
This law is gonna be delegated to CFB. It's gonna be another thing that they're.
Another thing, so
You gotta fund it.
yeah, we have to find a solution. We know what the problem is, and the solution has to be monitoring, enforcement, and people to follow through with the laws, because what's the point of putting law over law over law over law if there's no way to enforce it?
Yeah.
I just got a question.
Okay.
I agree with the monitoring and the enforcement. We were talking about the staffing to monitor this. Where does the funding come where the staff and monitoring could be increased? What part within the city bureaucracy could we address where that funding could come to action? Because it's going to need more money. Where would that come from to establish enforcement, monitoring, and increase and so forth?
Yeah, so it's a budget, it's a budget item, the funding for the CFP.
Campaign finance board.
Yeah.
No,
That's-
that I understand, but it appears now that there's not enough funding
Yeah.
there. Is there any sort of mechanism, or could that be addressed in some way? Because to me, I agree with what everyone is saying, but unless you have the money to do it, it's not going to get done.
But,
So
yeah.
that's my question. Where would the funding, where would we be able to, not CB6,
That's
but
it.
I mean, what would be the mechanism to increase the funding to do all of the
Yeah,
things
so
that
I
have just
mean,
been
I
mentioned?
get what you're saying, we're with money, I mean, we don't have enough money for our parks, we don't have enough money for our school.
It's a political
Yeah,
negotiation.
yeah, so I can't answer.
The
Yeah.
mayor will not want more funding for the
Yeah,
CFP.
yeah,
Especially
Well,
this,
and many other electeds will want more
yeah,
funding.
not the other elected too,
Right,
they're all,
right.
they're all.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a sexy issue with
No.
anyone
Yeah.
ready for office.
Not for politicians.
Yeah.
Yes.
not to mention the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We don't want to know where all those
So maybe
funds
we
come
can-
from.
Brendan, let's take a look at the other one, which is a little more in the weeds, but it's 095.
Looks like the only thing this is intended to do is to, if you solicit something with a contribution and you use a hyperlink.
Yeah, with the
in an
hyperlinks thing, that
email.
was the other piece of that, which is
Yeah.
if you send out a hyperlink, it's not considered bundling. This would make it
Yeah.
that is
Oh.
This would
bundling.
make it.
It was kind of, it
What's
hasn't, lots haven't been
other
updated
one?
to. technology,
Statutory languages.
right? It's like before when you had to go
In hand to do it hand.
do
by
it
hand.
and
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
which wasn't even that long ago, I mean, in the 13 election, they were still doing checks.
so that allows for a lot of donations to be bundled, but they don't count as that. So
Mhm.
that,
Should we go back to checks?
No, I think there's more transparency about paying
By
online.
paying on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
0952, intro to 0952, this would, it requires the CF, again, this is about resourcing,
Mhm.
but it requires the finance board to verify contributions when those contributions in the aggregate are greater than $50 and made through an intermediary or through means of contribution cards, and that's for cash donations. So again, this is going after that exact straw donor
Right.
scheme,
Yeah,
right? Where it's saying like, if someone's bundling donations,
Yeah, like Get Blue or.
you need to, well, that's just a platform.
Yeah,
You could, that's individual donations too, but if you're bundling donations, then you need to somehow, this is saying you need to go and verify.
yeah.
A lot of the testimony was said this was, again, resource heavy, very difficult to do. And how do you verify with people all, during the middle of a campaign that they've actually contributed?
Yeah,
So
and
there's
it's hard. There was a special election in Queens a few years ago where they had a situation where one of the council candidates had done a lot of $50 donations. And the argument in that was in a lot of those communities, and I know for a fact too, you know what? Immigrant communities, they still do check cash, people like my dad, doesn't trust online payments and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to draft the reso on this if we want to commit to like
yeah.
the scope of the
Okay.
reso.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for volunteering.
Do we agree? I mean, what do we agree on? I guess is the question.
Yeah, what's the scope of what you're talking of the discussion? What's the
Do we
terms of
skip
the
the intros? I
resolution?
guess is the first key question.
Well,
Support for the what? For
what
the
I'm
intros?
hearing from a lot of people, it's more about the resourcing.
Is that the resourcing in the,
I don't know that we're opposed to closing these loopholes, but
Conditional support
It-
provided there is
there
funding.
has to be
Right.
funding in place,
conditions
otherwise,
contingent
What did you
on
say?
funding and.
Conditional support provided there's funding and enforcement.
And
for the
enforcement.
CFP.
Yes,
Right.
that's what, that was.
Yeah.
what I
And
was-
timely, I mean, the whole time sequence doesn't make this enforceable. Because look at how many years after you discover this. You may discover some things along the way, but they're not the big things. So I think just piling on responsibility without determining what it will cost and what's the process doesn't make sense to me.
yeah. One recommendation that I had that wasn't necessarily considered in these, because what folks were saying about the enforcement issue is because actually the way the law is written, it's pretty extreme. Is it basically says if we detect, they say we will send a notice to someone who was a donor to you. If they don't respond within 30 days, you will be banned from all public matching funds. So that was called out as being perhaps extreme in that, there could be a lot of legitimate reasons why someone doesn't respond to a notice from the city about giving a donation, and then that candidates would be banned. So that would be difficult to kind of implement. But one thing that I had
Including sabotage by your opponent.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or what if instead of that they did rather than doing it for every single person, again, it's a resource issue, but rather just do a statistical sampling and say we're going to reach out and we have to get so many
Right.
back that say,
Okay.
you know, a lower, much lower threshold.
Yeah. How would they do that though? Like they check with people, and if your address, like for the matching funds, if you donated and then the address, like I had some friends who moved and then they rejected the donations because it wasn't the address that the Board of Elections had with them. They do that, or their friends who worked at banks that had regulations that you couldn't donate and you have to return the checks and stuff. So they were pretty quick on doing that.
Well, that gives
What
me
if
hope.
what if they were to do this? What if they were to do this upstream and have the donors verify their credibility first, instead of doing it on the back end after the money's already been given? So in other words, if I want to contribute, say more than, I don't know, $100 to a campaign, I have to be verified myself, and they can send perhaps a mail. I mean, the way like Google does for their advertising accounts, they send you an email, or not an email, but they send you
Text.
they send you snail mail
Text.
to verify that you exist. No. If you want to verify yourself for Google, you need to. They send you an email, or I'm sorry, a regular snail mail, and then they give you a code, and you have to enter the code in order to verify yourself, and it goes to a hard address. And that gets away from all of this nonsense with the foreign donors, all of the other stuff. I mean, that seems to make a lot more sense to me than trying to catch this after the fact, after people have made their contributions. You follow me? You understand what I'm saying?
You would imagine if you would
Verify the donors
to-
first
to
before they
make the
make
verification process.
before they make their
Overly-
their contribution.
I'm just concerned that we're trying to rewrite the law,
Yeah.
whereas we should just be passing judgment on
Yeah.
what city council has
Yeah,
put before us.
I mean, if it
And
were
we
up
can-
to
we can,
me, I'd
like,
redo the
Go
whole.
into a different.
Well, I don't think
50 different things.
I don't know that city council has even considered something like that. A lot of, you don't, I'll be honest with you, I'll be very frank, you don't have the smartest,
I understand that.
they got elected, but like I said,
Well, the only thing is like, so
you're not
we're
dealing with
talking
the
about-
sharpest knives in the drawers.
we're talking about
And I-
people who may be giving cash contributions, right?
Mhm.
What are they going to verify with? They
Mhm.
may not have a smartphone, you know, I don't
I
understand.
think we can put in the
So I
resident that
understand how
we
Like I
don't
said,
put
only
the
if you're
30-day
giving-
notice issue.
Oh, if you're accepting a contribution over $100, let's say, then you have the verification before you can give the $100. I don't think
Yeah,
it's
and you can't do cash
outrageous.
belts anyway,
Yeah, you
so.
can.
And if
To address
Yeah.
it again, is
they
there
can
any?
still give cash,
Under $100.
No,
Yeah,
under
only
100.
100, you can't do over
You
100.
can't do over $100 cash donations. It's already illegal.
I just,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, with any contribution, no matter what the amount is there any mechanism, the same way with certain, I would say, political platforms, where you're giving to the candidate, there's a certain portion where you have the option to give to the platform. Is there a way that there would be an option that it might say when you're contributing, that 2%, just 2%, no matter if it's $50 or it's $1,000, 2% goes to the campaign finance board to promote transparency. And I think a lot of citizens would be willing to do that if there were a mechanism to do that, so that there would be more funding to the board, and then there would be more staffing and more monitoring. Is there any way that we would be able to at least suggest that, even though politicians don't want the campaign finance board, but citizens, if they know that's what that 2% was for, is there any way that we could at least suggest that in some way?
Would it be an automatic or a voluntary?
Well, in the same way, when you do your taxes and it's the $3 or something that
Yeah.
you can donate, I forgot what it is for the
$2,
Campaign
a dollar.
fund, the
The campaign
yeah.
fund, but it's not the campaign
Sure.
fund. This is for campaign, this is for transparency. I think a lot of citizens would not mind.
It's essentially a tax on
Yeah.
donations to fund the CFB.
You know
Fund the
what?
CFP. I mean,
That's a great idea.
It's a great idea. I mean, they already
Yeah.
charge when you
Yeah,
donate through NYC Votes, you have a transaction fee, just like Act Blue does, but that's covering the cost of the platform.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and I've even done that if they
Yeah.
ask, so but to me, citizens would not mind, and it's just such a small percentage.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and honestly, if you're donating $50, the fact that it's 2%, you're not even gonna notice it, because
Right.
you're not doing $50 plus the 2%. It's 2% of that
Yeah.
$50,
Yes.
and I think it should be established as a tax, I think it should be voluntary. I think it should be
Well, maybe
Well,
as a
we
pilot.
could present
initially,
Yeah,
do
a
it.
mandatory fee or.
a mandatory
Yeah.
fee. That's a brilliant idea.
is some way that, how would we present that?
Well, we could put in our
We could
resolution.
put it in our resume.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah.
As a funding mechanism.
But I
Yeah.
think citizens would not mind. Oh, thank you. I really think that they would.
That's a really brilliant idea. I mean, you don't have to impose new taxes to fund the CFP. You just have to, make it part of the system. You want to donate, 2% goes to the CFP. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope we can incorporate that in the resolution.
I think it's
So
great.
I have a question on that. I have a question on funding outside of the city to pay for city employees. And then how would you account for the money? What accountability?
How would you what?
Account for the money that it actually is going in what is contributed? What accounting would take place?
Then you're
2%
saying
of the
that
gross, right?
2% of every donation is going into some fund that's for
Right.
CFP,
That'd be
right?
fairly straightforward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward.
No, it's not, because it has to get from, you can't set up separate funds. It has to go through the city itself. So going through the city, how does it get from the city to there? And what are the mechanisms that they had? And how will you know, I'm gonna make a number, that they got, I'll say $100,000. Who's gonna, and you have 2% of that, who's gonna do the accounting for it to make sure that the money is where it's supposed to be?
The finance department.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
the fund-
so B makes a good point. So because the city I mean, we don't have taxing power, right? So the taxes come from the state, but what happens with parking fees? How does the
Right.
city get that revenue, right?
That's why I was asking, because I don't know. I think we need to do a little research on where does the revenue go? And how do they account?
Yeah, because like parking fees, I'm pretty sure go to the general fund, and so then would this go and then it has to be an appropriation?
Then it has to come out. That's sort of
Yeah.
like what we do with our street fair money.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
street fair money that we
The
get,
specific appropriation.
we have to
Yeah.
put in the city budget. It's a
Yeah,
separate
right.
line item,
Yeah,
but we
Yeah.
don't keep it directly. And then we have to acquisition to use it for various things. So
Yeah.
we're making a charge. So I think that's how it would have to work. So it becomes city funds,
Yeah.
basically.
Right.
yeah,
As long as it can be presented.
The only problem
First you
is
have
the
to
city.
present the mechanism and
Yeah,
then.
you have to get
Yeah,
support.
yeah,
for
but
that, yeah.
first you have to
Yeah.
present the mechanism and then,
And then it's-
yeah.
Kind of
decide how it's going to
operational
be.
issue, how you
Right,
operationalize.
that's an operational.
It can't be that difficult. It can't be that difficult to monitor,
It's
what's
just
coming
legal
in.
writing and implementation.
Yeah, but I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
Go-
the only
go
thing
ahead,
is
Ben.
the city council will probably do what the state legislature does with the lottery money, which is simply reduce the financing for the campaign finance board by the amount of the anticipated revenue from the 2% tax.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, that's what happened
What
when
did
we
he say? I can't hear.
because you will, when he's using example of lottery money, right? For instance, education, in states like Massachusetts where they fund education from lottery, then they just reduced education funding because they had more lottery money. So then if we have this 2%,
New York.
they just reduce their funding for CFP by 2%.
Well, we can say
Oh.
that they have to maintain. their
Yeah.
funding.
No, we can say that they have to maintain.
Right.
Yeah,
No, maybe put it as a discretionary fund or something.
Yeah,
Well,
To
can
be
we?
used by the
present
campaign
that-
finance board for their own purposes,
yeah.
They may want to do research, they may want to purchase software, they may want to do a number of things. But I'd make it a discretionary allocation by this campaign finance. I wouldn't put it into the general fund that sense to go to the, or that would be budgeted for the, for other city operations.
Yeah, can it be established in the reso that that additional 2% is not in view of the regular funding for CFP?
Yeah.
That it's in
We
addition
can say
to?
whatever we want.
Yeah.
Okay, so
In
what
addition
if I
to one of our favorite words, baseline funding.
I'm not
that
gonna
we
put
use
in a
our budget.
specific number,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
We'll just say.
Yeah, because this
Yeah.
is generally, I mean,
It just say,
Suggested.
a
Suggested.
percentage to be determined, but does not take the place of, nor does it
Right.
We don't want it to displace.
displace or
Yeah.
substitute
Okay.
the funding
Yeah.
for,
So I
that
got
is
that.
presently in place for CFP.
I'll say we have an issue with the 30-day
If you need a
notice.
hand, yeah, if you need a hand with the wording, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I'll
I know.
send something out to the group.
And
Okay,
just the last piece of this, which we haven't talked about yet, is Intro 0954. And that simply requires CFB to mail acknowledgements of contributions to each contributor's residential address. It's sort of
to
like,
mail it?
so like if
Yeah.
you've given a donation, they're gonna send you something saying you have given this donation, so that it avoids the problem of, somebody gave someone's name and said they were the donor.
Straw
but
donor.
They weren't. Right,
Mhm.
so, but the thing is, so the campaign finance board says not just mail, let us collect the phone number, email address.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it's
that we can
common sense.
at least
I
have
think
multiple ways. to
mail is
contact them.
like, first of all,
That's
that's
too much of a burden.
hugely expensive.
It's an unnecessary burden.
It's an unnecessary burden,
Yes.
and come on, man, we're in 2024. You should be able to.
And so the bill is to reform that to say,
So
phone
the bill
and-
doesn't say that now, but in the
Just-
testimony from all these groups
You're
that
suggesting
testified,
we-
they said, and the campaign finance board
Yeah.
itself said, please allow us to collect. Tell the campaigns from their donors, they need to collect the phone number or an email address. So
Absolutely,
that we can have that information.
absolutely.
Because basically right now what happens is the CFP tries to mail stuff. And then, but then if they don't get a response, then they like Google search trying to find a phone number for the person or an
That's
email.
just, no,
So they
that's
spend
just,
all their time.
Yeah, so this
It
is
is
for,
like-
again, this has to be
I
for
would do it out.
cash or check donations, because if you pay online, they ask you for your phone number and
Exactly.
email, and you get only an email confirmation.
yeah, so this, I mean,
It's antiquated.
it's antiquated, it's inefficient, and it's counterproductive.
It
I mean, this makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 70 years old, but man, who does this anymore?
Yeah, well, so the law,
I
I
mean-
mean, but the thing is, the law was written, so the law was
Right.
written in 1988.
Right.
Right, and as late as the 2013 election, the city didn't have an online platform itself, and then there is this additional thing, is when you use these platforms, you gotta pay the fee to do it.
Right.
And in my example of some people who still prefer to use checks. Yeah.
And this came up in like the straw donor schemes, right? These
Mhm.
weren't people who were going online and giving credit cards.
Right.
These were people who were supposedly who gave money orders or cash. That's the investigation that's going on right now. There was a
Okay.
lot of cash donation and
From Turkey.
and
huh?
money order
Yeah.
donations.
From
So,
Turkey,
well, and other places.
and then to
Another
have a
place.
building that doesn't pass an inspection, so then it could collapse any day or something, I mean, it just makes no sense.
I mean, corruption is the acid that destroys societies, it really is. It's just awful.
Any other thoughts on these bills of the city council or on campaign finance in general?
Are we good on the rest of it?
I have the notes. I mean, it's gonna take some time to draft.
Yeah.
And everyone will
And
be
you
able to
just
comment.
send them
and
around
I'll send a
and
shared
we'll
document.
comment.
and
Okay.
Yeah, and if you'd
Cool.
like, David, since you're doing minutes anyway, I'll send you the YouTube video to me, but
Yeah.
that'll also be a helpful resource
Yeah.
to sort of compile committee members' thoughts.
The other thing I'll add is that this is the city, the state has this year, the first year of public financing of campaigns with the state. And the state has underfunded, I mean, they're spending just as much, like their amount of money is equal to what the city's spending, but in staffing is the same amount and it's a whole state, right? And I would argue that we want them to, especially given how new the program is, to be like, okay, you should be following these types of rules.
The only other item that I wanted to bring up under this agenda topic was that, okay, we touched on kind of campaign finance. I mean, there could be many other discussions, but one that occurred to me because it comes directly to our committee is, and relevant to some of the investigations that are going on. If you all would, those of you who were last year, if you recall, we got the citywide statement of needs for facilities. So the real estate, the leases that the city signs with different brokers is also central to one of the investigations.
Mhm.
And so it behooves us, I think, as a community board, when we get, the next time we get the citywide statement of needs about facilities and agencies being relocated across this, to kind of do a little more diligence and see what agencies are being moved, why, and maybe look at what are those addresses and the kind of the ownership lease
Yeah, why,
agreements.
no, it's really good.
I just think, because it comes to us already, it's not something new,
Yeah,
that we can sort of remember to look at that when it comes.
I'm unfamiliar with it because I wasn't here last year, but
so what he's talking about is, so say, again, I'm gonna use an example, like Department of Sanitation is now moving to a different building. And the city is leasing that building, so the question is, okay, why did they move? Who's getting that money from the new lease?
yeah.
Is it the government of Turkey or? does
Yeah.
that
Or
exist?
certain brokers.
Corker and broker who's in
Yeah,
Japan with,
yeah.
Yeah,
on a nice trip to Japan.
listen,
I
you're
did get
talking
an
to someone who's
upgrade.
been in the real estate business for 30 years, and it can get really ugly and nasty, and if you're a decent human being like I am, which I'll never become a millionaire.
I'd rather be poor than be one of those
Me too.
people. Rather be poor.
Me too, I'd
Yeah.
rather be poor, and if I think something doesn't smell right, I walk away. But, I attended that seminar for the housing that we had like a couple of weeks ago.
Was one of the trainings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I asked a question like, how much land does the city actually own? And what are they doing with it? Like, if the sanitation is in a building that belonged to the city, why are we moving it to another one?
And what do they do with that space?
And what are they doing with that space? And, when we talk about in the budget here, to talk about, we need more affordable housing. And this was all on affordable housing and all that stuff. And I asked the question and no one could answer it. Like, what percentage of the land in the city belongs to the city and to the state? And no one could answer it. And then what do they do and how is it? What is the order in which the use is done? Is it done for housing? Is it done for manufacturing? Is it done, And that's something that we should probably get into at some point. Because when we ask for more affordable housing, yeah, but then they do the Spark thing or they do,
So the community land trust people
I know,
would have some of that information, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna look into it.
The other bill, I don't know if we've talked about it here, but there's the advising consent bill that council's trying to pass, and was the whole purpose of this charter revision commission that Adams put through. That's another corruption point that we could
Those-
easily back. Or
Yeah,
come- I don't know if we've talked about it yet, but
I don't remember, but do you remember?
it's a huge issue, and appointment of commissioners is something that council only has the rights over 3 of the commissioners right now.
Yeah.
3 big ones.
You mean
But the rest of the commissioners are totally the mayor's
The mayor,
discretion,
and-
and there's arguments on both sides.
Yeah, and then now that the.
You want the executive to be robust, but you also don't want corruption.
Yeah,
And we've seen commissioners who acted very correctly in this administration and in every administration that has ever existed, so.
yeah.
I mean, the city council tried to pass this, but then it got pushed
And then
aside
the
by
mayor
the mayor.
preempted
Because of
it
these,
with his own
With
charter.
his own
Yeah.
charter.
So that to me is a corruption bill. And we could easily lump that into
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
discussion.
look,
Maybe
It's-
like put it on the docket for another.
Yeah.
Which bill is that? Which intro is that?
Let me look it up. This happened in early June, I wanna
You mean
say.
the one that city council.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
council announced it, and then the mayor, in some chicanery, announced his own charter revision commission, because it is a charter
Right,
issue.
right.
It's a powers, separation of powers
Right.
issue. INT 908 for 2024.
INT
908? 908?
If you wanna, Brandon, if you could,
Can you pull it up?
Oops, that's not what I.
but I think that, so right now, I think the
In
status
relation to
quo is,
requiring council advice and consent of certain commissioners.
right now, I think it's fire, education, there's three big ones that has advising consent,
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
rest are totally the mayor's discretion.
Right.
And so, you know,
But the problem is he'll never allow that to go to a chart. It's a charter thing, so it
Yeah.
has to go
Well,
through
I
the
mean,
entire referendum process.
Right.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
all
it
the
has
voters
to go
need
through a charter revision.
There are a few things that shouldn't be under the mayor, and the Department of Investigation is one of them.
I don't think that's one of them that's accepted. That's not his.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff
There's three.
that's under the mayor that belongs independently.
Anyways, we can table it and bring it up.
If you
at a different
remember,
meeting.
if you remember,
Yeah,
Bill de Blasio
I would say
Bill de Blasio fired the chief of his Department of Investigation
campaign finance stuff is important.
Yeah.
Can we
This is
put
like a
this on the-
fundamental governance
when he was
question.
getting close.
Most governments have that check and balance.
Yeah.
Can you put this on the agenda for the next meeting?
maybe for,
So you're thinking it should be a separate resolution?
It's a separate issue.
What,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a separate issue. Yeah, it's a huge bill.
Yeah,
And it's,
Well, and it has the whole advise and consent issue and the power of the executive. So
yeah,
it's really, I mean, we're dealing with this on a national level now.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
this is the home
it's
issue.
a core power issue,
it's a core, yeah.
but it's also a corruption issue is my point.
No, I agree with
Yeah,
you. I mean, as we've seen, like you said, the commissioners, I mean, it's kind of.
The housing commissioner,
Yeah,
that guy.
it's kind of
we can
unbelievable.
definitely take it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, I think it's probably too much for this resolution to have
Yeah.
everything in
Yeah,
there.
I wouldn't combine it. I would keep the other on strictly the finances.
Yeah.
no, that's.
Yeah, but
totally
our
fine.
agenda item was transparency.
Yeah, yeah.
and So this
No,
comes under that.
Very much.
Yeah, very
Thank
much
you
so.
for bringing it up because I wanted a broader discussion. We just wanted to
Yeah,
target this thing first, but.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's something that. our-
returned unsigned by the mayor, that
Continue
means
to look
what?
at.
That it didn't, that he rejected it, vetoed it.
Sorry, Jim.
Jim, we
He's
didn't
just
hear
talking about the
anything.
charter
No,
revision.
I'm sorry. No, the legislative history says that it was returned unsigned by the
I mean,
mayor.
the city,
which I guess
we have,
presumes that
we
it's
have
a-
checks and balances.
a
Oh,
veto.
sure.
Right, I mean, and we created the Office of Public Advocate to have an additional check, right? That happened sometime, I guess, in the nineties and stuff. And so perhaps there's also, what are the other offices, like how is city council checking, how's the controller, how's the public advocate?
I agree. I'm not saying there's
Yeah.
not, I'm saying there might be not enough, and this is a fairly straightforward, commonplace.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you, but I'm saying is that,
Constitutional
are
structure
these other
most everyone
offices
have.
need to perhaps be more emboldened to do that check as well?
For sure.
Great, so, shall we move on? There's no chair here, so there's no chair's report, and then any old or new business that anybody wants to bring up.
So I wanted to bring up
Old
somewhat,
business,
oh, okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
go ahead now,
Sure.
I can go after you, Mike, I mean.
no, go ahead.
Okay, Rashma, you go.
Yeah. So we had, I feel like it's
Rashma.
sometime in the spring, we had done a resolution about the community board being involved in the licensing of the gaming licenses as well as the cannabis licensing, because they had kept us out of it, and how when there is these new commissions that we want to have a voice. And to add to that, so we have a situation, if anybody is on business affairs, there's a Hallmark store on the corner of 44th and Second, which is a block away from where I live.
I went to that meeting.
Yeah, you were at that meeting, right?
Yeah.
And so you heard what happened, and the issue is that there's an existing tenant and one of the few small businesses we have left in the neighborhood who's being forced out because a cannabis business wants to come in. And this person, right now, the Hallmark shop is paying 25,000, the cannabis business can pay 40,000. So it is, obviously, the landlord is gonna do this. And there is already a cannabis shop on 38th and Second, and as well as somewhere like 47th and Second, right?
Yeah.
But it is, the law is 1,000 feet. And within 500 feet, there is a couple of schools of small children and a couple of religious institutions as well, but it's not on the law is on a direct line. And I would like to write a resolution saying that just doesn't, you know, we can't have, because if you're gonna let this happen, then every business is going to become a cannabis business, right? We're gonna, because your mom and pop shops aren't gonna be able to pay the kind of money a cannabis business can. And are we gonna let all our small businesses be displaced?
At what
They-
stage of the rental, at what stage is this?
Tomorrow they have a.
There's a resolution.
Yeah, but tomorrow they have a court date. I know because
The,
I,
the Hallmark has a
Yeah.
court date?
yeah,
Okay, fine.
they
I didn't know that,
have,
yeah.
yeah, I've been pretty involved in it
Yeah.
because there's absolutely no way I want that Hallmark store gone.
Yeah,
And the neighborhood came out in force to that business,
yeah, we
And
had.
sorry, the location is in violation of OCM's regulations?
No, it's not.
Technically.
Because I want to write a letter, a resolution to our elected officials saying that OCM needs to revise
they
its,
do,
its zoning laws because
yeah.
1,000 feet is too close. A school being around the corner is too close, just because it's 300 feet to a school that's basically like toddlers, but because it's not on the direct line, it's fine.
Should that come from us or from business affairs and
Well, it could be either. I mean, I was saying because we had already written a resolution and for governmental affairs, because the business licensing is about the
More about the
licensing,
businesses,
right?
yeah.
But we will talk, talked about, I just want to bring it up to see what people here thought about this.
No,
And
Could we
yes,
do,
and
could we do like a
agree
joint
100%.
committee resolution?
yeah,
with
oh,
business affairs?
Brendan has a.
Brendan.
One thing that might be worth doing, like the executive committee is a good place to discuss like which committee something like this belongs in.
Okay.
So, at exec, like Nag discussed with Anton and Sandy,
Yeah,
like, is this budget, is this business affairs?
Well, business affairs is very involved in it. If you
Yes,
remember
yeah.
this.
yeah, and I brought this up at that meeting, you were there, yeah.
I was there, I spoke, and I mean, and I remember saying, I'm not speaking as a CV6 member, I'm
Yeah.
speaking as a neighbor, because this is really, what's really galling is the fact that there are so many empty commercial spaces along the street, but they have chosen this particular, they've chosen to kick these poor people out. What happened was they had, during COVID, they had a lease, and during COVID, in order to keep them in place, they actually remained open during COVID. The landlord dropped the rent, but as a condition of dropping the rent, the landlord put in an escape clause, which means that they can tell them 90 days ahead of time that they can leave. So this group of, investors is it from upstate, I think?
Yeah, it's upstate, the guy has. a
Yeah, the
cannabis
guy
business
is
called,
like,
in
it's like an
Syracuse.
empire, it's a cannabis empire. And he's offering to pay $40,000. Why he wants this particular space, I don't know, because it's in the building where, I don't know how many
Bunch of consulates are
embassies
there, yeah.
and consulates are there, and it's just an abomination. So, the business affairs voted against the,
Yeah, there's a resolution that'll be at full.
We're
board.
all voting on it tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it's on the tracker.
yeah, but it's really disturbing because these people have been there 20 years and the neighborhood really, really loves them. And they now have a sign on the window that says, thank you to our neighbors for,
Yeah,
we just don't want that guy.
yeah, and my concern, the reason to bring this up as a broader resolution in amending those rules is because this community organized, and partially because like there's two of us who are on the community board who live in the community, but what about another community where a
Yeah.
business could be displaced, where people aren't as vocal?
Good point. Great. Jen, we'll go to you on old business, new business.
Yeah, it's old business. And Reshma can attest to this. I've been pushing this issue for several years now. The controller released his annual comprehensive report a couple of weeks ago, and it shows, again, he's using the 7% compounded annual growth rate, assumed compounded annual growth rate, to do his actuarial computations. That's 110 basis points higher than New York State is using. We are only funded 85%. To give you an example of how much of a difference that is, the New York State or New York City CRS education, the teachers' retirement system pension fund would be underfunded by $28 billion if we went down to a 6% an additional $28 billion. Now, keep in mind, we are only 85% funded. Everybody in the world that does pension consulting and oversight suggests a 6% compounded annual growth rate and 100% full funding. We are now, as I said, 85% funded. We are down to a 7% compounded annual growth rate, whereas the state of New York uses only a 5.9% compounded annual growth rate. There's additional risk, obviously, in taking the higher compounded annual growth rate, which the controller tends to consult. What's the word I'm looking for? He tends to aggravate that underfunding with his own personal political agenda. For example, pretty much everybody in the world in the finance world is running away from ESG funding, environmental, social, and governance. And Wall Street is certainly abandoning it big time, but I believe the city is still deep into it. And we've asked, and I know Reshma has asked that the controller come or send a representative to this meeting, to this committee, any number of times, and he has so far refused. So I just want to let it be known that if anybody from the controller's office shows up at our full board meeting, I'm going to ask these questions, and I'm going to ask why they allow this this continued underfunding, and I believe is patently reckless campaign finance. I'm sorry, campaign finance, pension funding.
Okay,
I think perhaps this committee might consider writing a resolution to that effect, and asking exactly those questions. Why are we 110% below what the state? I'm sorry, 110% above the compounded annual growth rate of the state. Why are we only 85% funded? And why are we continuing? I mean, it's not as if this hasn't been going on for any number of years. We've got city employees. I mean, we've got guys like Jesus who are going to depend on their pension one day, and we've just been reckless with it, frankly.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Sandy has her hand raised, so I'd like to go to Sandy.
Thank you. And just back to the cannabis issue and this particular shop, I'm wondering if this is a time-sensitive issue, because I think regardless of who writes the resolution, it's something that we should address. And it's always just a little bit frustrating if we wait for exec, we then have another month, we then present it, so it's going to be next year before we get a full resolution in front of the board, probably. So I think whoever wants to address it, if it then gets passed on to another committee, that's fine. But I really think we probably want to take action.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the committee feels about
Yeah,
that.
so that's the resolution for this space. What I'm saying is let's do a broader resolution to stop this from happening other, and I'm happy to draft that resolution. Because I was just using an example, like we were vocal, there could be people who are not vocal.
Right.
If you would like to take the lead on that, I would say let's just do one. We can pass it along to the other committee.
I would have it for tomorrow.
Right.
But
It's really important, and that in the casino also is a really important issue. The casinos and within a neighborhood. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is before you joined or not, but we passed 2 resolutions against the casino.
I spoke before I was even on the community board.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, Sandy. I spoke before I was even on the community board against the casino.
Yeah, and I mean, we've tried to address it in our I mean, we've been very vocal about the casino. I think if we could come up with a resolution that was, as you said, sort of broader and address
Yeah.
this particular issue of rents and shops, we could take it to borough board too, because I'm sure it's something that affects the whole city.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
citywide, and this is why, and I hadn't thought about that. I mean, we supported, legalization, and that's something I just hadn't thought about, was how we could then have only cannabis shops on every corner, because no one else can afford anything. It's Dwayne Reed, Starbucks, and cannabis shop.
But the problem is that, the Dwayne Reed's, the cannabis shops and all this other thing is coming to fill in a vacuum that has been created by the city's inability to protect small businesses. We
Right.
have a serious issue. I have a master's in economics, and it's capitalist economics, and the basis of capitalism is the principle of perfect competition. You can't have perfect competition if you only have one store. You have to have, this is the fabric of the city. The fabric of the city is small businesses. And one of the reasons why I decided to join the community board was I really want to do something about the city doing something for small businesses, be it tax breaks, be it incentives, be it, whatever it has to be. And actually it's all related, because when you take down an entire block of small townhouses and you build these behemoths that have 44,000 square feet of your commercial space, who's going to fill it? So, it's all tied in and it's all related. That we have been slowly getting rid of our small businesses. When I first came to New York City, you had, fabric stores and plant stores and all kinds of fish. I used to remember the Fulton Fish Market. Do you remember the Fulton Fish
But-
Market, Sandy?
One thing I might recommend is that, I mean, I think definitely writing this resolution is good, but there's probably a little bit of research we need to do into what policies do exist.
Right.
So that's just a caution that, yes, I mean,
To support our small businesses? Are you
for
talking
small
about?
businesses, but
Yeah,
let's
because,
address.
there was
this issue.
legislation that Keith has passed, right, in neighborhoods, I can put that stuff in.
That
Yeah.
was land use, but yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to,
Yeah, but these are things that have already happened, because we have been talking about protecting our small businesses for quite
Okay.
some time.
but nothing's really being, really
So
isn't.
but let's follow up with this particular issue and Reshma, that'd be great if you,
Yeah.
and, we can pass it to Balk, we'll make sure it
I'll
gets,
draft it and then circulate it with us and exec, you guys can take a look at it.
right, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Can
Sam.
we
Thank you, Sandy.
can we return to the issue of the underfunded pensions? I'm gonna send a schedule of the underfunding for,
I had a question for you. Is there any
Yep.
city or state that has 100% funding? I thought almost everybody's underfunded.
yeah, there are a couple. I think it was one of the states down south. I forget which one. But yeah, everybody
Pension
should
fund
be
is having a good year.
tightening this up.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was gonna say, we are gonna have a great stock market according to somebody. So maybe 7% is not bad.
15 or 20%.
15-20% maybe,
That averages out the.
Well,
if we're to believe
I'm
our.
looking,
I'm taking
I'm
out my
looking at,
stock market.
I'm looking at, just two of these right now, two of the pension funds, the
Yeah.
NICERS and TRS. Okay, and they have a aggregate shortfall at 6% of let's call it 40 billion, 45 billion.
Yeah.
$45 billion. I'll remind you that the entire budget of the city of New York is about 4 times that. And those are just the 4. Those are NICERS and TRS. That doesn't include the cops and the firemen.
Yeah.
We're just playing with fire here. And I think if we're responsible representatives of the city, of this community that we represent, we are not doing our duty by ignoring this issue, because the cutbacks that will be necessary to meet these pension obligations will be considerable.
No.
I'm looking now at the cops. Okay, the cops and the firemen, that's an additional 24 billion dollars shortfall. So you've got basically half the city budget shortfall by the 6%. And keep in mind that this is often 85% short, off 85% funding. So you're already short 15% of what's required to pay these pensions. So if anybody's interested, I would be happy to make a motion to draft a resolution addressing these issues. Don't know if I have any support for that in this committee or not, but I think it's a critically important issue. And it's one
Jim,
that
can we
we'll
see the
suffer from
resolution if you're
going
willing to do
forward.
it? Jim, you've spoken about it over the years and
I'm
most-
happy to do it.
yeah, and if you could
I'm
draft
happy to
something
do
that
it.
we can look at the facts.
And actually, I can send you. Yep, I'll send you the I'm sending you the schedule. I'm actually on my computer and viewing this through my telephone, but I'll send you the documentation.
Yeah.
I'll send it to the
Unfortunately,
office
you're
and they
dealing
can
with a
send it
lot
out.
of beds.
Who's acting as staff today?
It's Brendan.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's Brendan?
Yes,
Here.
it's Brendan.
Send it to Brendan. Okay. All right.
Jim,
Yeah, I'll send it right now. Yep.
Jim, it's Tanya. What does the law say about funding the pensions? Is there a law in place that requires it to be 100%?
No, but there's best practices.
Yeah.
And,
Just a best practice?
say it again.
So it's just a best practice. There's not a law that requires it to be funded.
No, unfortunately.
Jim, doesn't ERISA
I
do
thought
that?
we have a law.
Jim,
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't
No,
ERISA do that?
no, because municipal pensions are exempt from
ERISA?
Yeah. We're looking at an explosion. We're looking at an explosion.
So Jim, I mean, if you're willing to write the resolution, I think it is a very important issue. The one thing that I would say about the ESG, Europe is not moving away from ESG, and the city, I think, has, as a whole, made a really strong commitment to move away from fossil fuels. And so while I think that unfunded pension liability is an issue that could be a problem for the city, I wouldn't want to move away from a commitment to, not invest in fossil fuels.
And if you consider, I think the folks in not only Wall Street but also in the city are both moving away from it. And besides, the performance on ESG is substantially below that of other market sectors.
It is, and it's a long view.
Brendan, I just sent it to you. Say again?
If the New York City pension fund hadn't divested from tobacco in 1994, we wouldn't have seen this downfall in smoking in this country.
Yeah, good point.
Well,
Because we still had people in the House committee saying, oh yeah, it doesn't cause lung cancer. Yeah.
I'm just curious as to why there's no law.
Can we maybe table this discussion for a
Yeah.
future meeting?
There is-
This
there
is
is
a
for
deeper
private pension.
discussion.
Another discussion.
there is for private pensions. For private pensions, there
Or
is.
private, yes.
But not for public.
Right, but not for governmental pensions.
Well, that's
ERISA
a
exempted
loophole.
them because of the separation of powers,
Mm-hmm.
federal republic, et cetera, et cetera. So,
All right.
but it's,
Any other?
as I say, it's a bomb waiting to happen.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay,
And
great.
you
So
have
we
my
will-
contact information if you need help with your resume. It's in
So we're
the
adjourning
document
the
I
meeting
just sent.
at
Brendan.
7:51 PM.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. All right.
So there, Jim.
Yes, feel better,
All right.
Jim.
Thank you.